Environmental effects are a huge part of the work of an effects artist. Adding visual elements in a level adds realism, life, and sets the mood. Wind, dust, birds, leaves in the wind, cloud, rain, smoke, etc. Smoke is pretty common, so let's start with a huge smoke coming from this chimney. We can take one of our existing emitter, the barrel smoke effects for example, and change some modules and settings. Add this effect on the chimney with a drag and drop and start tweaking the values. First of all, let's change the size and the velocity of our particles. We have to keep the general Y direction in this particular level. I start by changing the spawn location of the particles, raising the radius of the cylinder. I also make the particles live longer. We can see some puffs of smoke. It seems like we have to spawn more particles. It's always important to be careful of total number of particles. Once the spawn rate is increased, I change the lifetime values, then optimize to find the best balance between the two values. The particle system does not behave like I want it to, so I'm going back and forth between life, velocity, and color modules to find the good settings. Always look at your effects from the main point of view of the level. You may have to cheat to have a realistic result sometimes. This smoke is huge, so remember that both particle animation and the texture animation have to be very slow. Actually, I have to spawn a little more particles to avoid a gap between when we reach the maximum number of particles. You have to find the minimum number of particles and still have a nice rendering. As you can see, every time I respawn the particle system, a long time goes by before the smoke reaches its full volume. We need to pre-compute the smoke for a few seconds using the warm-up module. Once spawned, the smoke effects will have its final volume. Be careful, having a lot of particles using warm-ups can really slow down the map at launch. A very quick example of reusing smoke barrel effects. I've added some smoke on the Hummer's exhaust. As usual, set the size of the particles, their lifetime, and main velocity. A lot of explosions have happened in the background. As it is 4, some fires have started. We have to add some huge black smoke on the buildings. We could use a particle system, but this will cost a lot in both memory and performance. We are going to cheat and create a nearly free effect, which can be used for a lot of visual effects. Remember that cheaper is better, as you can add more and more effects cost-free, except memory-wise. We have to create a 3D mesh with a scrolling texture, and that's it. Starting from this particle texture, I've drawn a vertical smoke with an alpha channel. We have to make sure the texture is tiling on a vertical axis as it will be scrolling. Let's darken the texture and save it. Once in 3ds Max, I create a subdivided plane. Subdivisions are necessary for two reasons. Bending the mesh and the scrolling will be smoother without UV distortions. we have to create an opacity gradient. The smoke will be fading away at the top. The texture has an alpha channel already, but it will scroll with the diffuse texture. Adding vertex alphas solves this problem. I select the border vertices and added 0% opacity, then create a gradient both at the top and the bottom. The bottom ones are for better integration in the level. Turning the edges solves the triangulation glitch due to vertex alpha's behavior. I move the object's pivot to the bottom and bend, twist, and taper the mesh. Now we can export the object in FBX format. In UDK, I've imported the mesh and the texture. The material is different because of the panner, which controls the vertical movement. The smoke will move very slowly as it is in the distance. This blob texture is distorting the diffuse and alpha channel texture and adds some bellowing effect to the smoke. Finally, I can add some smoke in the map, give it a main direction, and scale it. Then I can duplicate it as many times as I want. I could also create new materials to add some new color and opacity variations, or change the scrolling speed based on the distance.